Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Dynamics Fortnite Fridays. You know, when the tagline isn't just kicked in, we've got a guest joining us today who will become a little bit more of a familiar face over time as he's going to kind of rotate in for Dan along with Max, who's producing all the time now. We're going to kind of switch things up on that finance supply chain side of things. So welcome to the show, Chin. Glad to have you as another guest host.
Yeah, thanks, Bart. Nice to be on, taking or allowing Dan to take a little break, and I'm excited to talk about some of the new features that are planned and coming.
Yeah, you
Glad to
bet.
be
But to start off, of course, you have a dad joke, right?
Of course, of course. Did you want me to start mine or
Yeah,
yours?
go ahead. Let's hear it.
All right, so I got one for you, Bart. Why don't skeletons fight each other?
Not in their bones. I don't know. What do you got?
Because they don't have the guts.
They don't have the guts. That's a good old dad joke. I love
Yeah.
it. I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I got one in return. So I tried to
All
make
right.
it kind of seasonal.
Yeah.
So when the police caught the thief who was stealing an advent calendar after the trial, what did he get? "25 days." Of course, of course. All right, all right. Well, let's get to the stuff that people are actually here for. I am going to start off, of course, with Power Platform things. New feature in the Power Pages Maker portal that you can now comment on things that people are doing. So we're getting to that co-editing experience in Power Pages like we have in full regular Power Apps. For Power Platform governance capabilities, if you happen to be using managed environments anywhere in your tenant, there's a new feature that just lit up in preview called Power Platform Advisor. So it may be worth it to find an environment that you like limit down to a user that has premium licensing, make it managed just so you can pick this up, because this is a super helpful thing. Advisor, as the other caveat here, is you have to turn on tenant level analytics. It's a pretty easy switch to flip, and I don't know why anyone wouldn't want it on. I think they should default it, but I don't get to make the rules. If you turn that on and you've got at least one managed environment, Advisor lights up. And once the data is all there in the tenant level analytics data repository that it populates once that's been flipped on, then Advisor is looking across all of that tenant level data and it's making recommendations based on the data that landed there. And those recommendations are usually around, oh, you've got apps that are orphaned. You need to assign a person that is still active to these things, or flows, depending on what asset type you're looking at. Or we're looking at things that are not quite as secure as you want them, or other things. And over time, we're going to be looking at license capabilities. We're just going to be making all sorts of these recommendations. And it's not just a straight recommendation. We're also putting actions behind it. So you can do a one-click take action on the recommendation that has been made by Advisor. So everybody's going to want this. I think it's a smart decision for us to put these kind of features behind this light paywall that is the managed environments paywall, needing premium licensing, but you can get it enabled in your tenant by having a single environment that's managed. So, use this to help yourself have a much easier time in finding all of those things that need to have action taken. Next topic is a new thing called Project Sophia. It is a new capability that is kind of using a bunch of Copilot-like functionality for trying to do some kind of exploration or research on things. So if you're sort of deciding on an idea and you're trying to just compile a bunch of research about that idea, complex problem of some sort, that pop open Project Sophia and let it help you. I'm not going to give you a demo or anything, but this article talks a little bit about what it does. I did play with it a little bit, and it's pretty slick. It's not wildly different than most of the other Copilots, but because it's sort of research focused, sometimes it's nice to have a business use case of why you would try it out. So play around with Sophia. Cards has a couple of things. one of the things that just happened in cards is that the connector inside of Power Automate that allows you to take a card and put it into a Teams chat is now generally available. So use it in a supported way, no longer in preview. And we've made some enhancements to it to make it just a little bit easier. You instantiate the card first, and then you post the card. And this is the only Teams post capability that works. And when you do the post card in chat or channel, you have to post as Power Apps instead of, some sort of named user or as the bot. But if you choose Power Apps, then you can choose the card down at the bottom, and you can either send it to a specific user or put it into a chat or put it into a channel. So you can kind of do things a few different ways, but it's really nice to know you can get a little automation help when working with these little micro apps that we call cards that are essentially adaptive cards with low code. If you are a Power Pages user as a customer, we have done some really nice things on the reporting side, right in the Power Platform Admin Center to make understanding what's going on those pages a whole lot better, both from a licensing standpoint and a capacity standpoint. Notice I've got 3 different links here. Security standpoint and analytics standpoint, security checking, and metering for your pages. So lots and lots of good stuff here. I mean, the articles are worth a quick read, but for me, the money is in when you just pull it up. They're actually really pretty. So if I just go into my admin center where I am a tenant level admin, and I look at resources and go to Power Pages, I get kind of that same starter point of just listing out all my sites so that I could take action on them and some slicers. But here's the security preview. Comes up quick. It's pretty easy to look at. I can see which authentication providers are in use, that kind of stuff. Analytics. I can see all sorts of other good stuff about my usage. I pick an environment and it's going to let me know what's going on in that environment. I'll be surprised if this one has anything going on in that particular environment, and sure enough, it's blank. But any site that's actually in use will have all sorts of great information here in the analytics. So use these new reporting updates if you're a Power Pages customer. Model-driven apps. We have had offline capability for quite some time, but it's been in preview for a while after they kind of redid it. Well, it's finally generally available. And when we made it generally available, we did a couple of tweaks. We made it easier to just tick the box. So that's been around for just can be used offline or not. But this experience for choosing the offline data profile right here is a much streamlined thing that now the app maker can just define. And if you don't have one already created, we did one better. We allow you to create a new mobile offline profile from the data that you're including in the app without you having to go trim it all and figure out which tables were there. You just say, make me a new profile, and it will interrogate the app, understand what data is being used, and make sure that's the only stuff that makes it into the offline profile to make that as simple and efficient as possible. So I thought that was all pretty good stuff. Cloud Flows have had the classic designer for quite some time. We've introduced the updated designer, and now it has been made generally available, and it is the default experience. I am still getting used to it. It has some really nice features that are super helpful. Copilot being one of the big ones to help you design the flows. As I have experimented with it, it does make some really interesting suggestions that are super helpful, but sometimes it breaks some stuff too. So I'm still switching back and forth between the classic and the new one. But it's nice to know that you can get support on it, log tickets if you need to. And they've listed quite a few things that are planned soon that are only in the classic designer, but are coming soon to the modern designer. And as some of these things land, especially things like copy paste, that will make the updated designer even more valuable. And hopefully fix a few of the other things to make it the default experience for me every time instead of switching back and forth. Automate Desktop. We learned quite a little bit about some of the things just from the Ignite announcements. I told you there was an update out there, but now we have the details of what that update contained. So I'm displaying it here. Copilot's probably the big news. Scripts we had talked about. I hadn't picked up that Copilot can generate those scripts, or if I did, it had left my memory already. And SAP commands showing up in the GUI are also now included to be able to interact with the SAP client and not do it all just through Cloud Flows or kind of brute force. So nice to know that there are some options there. I got a couple of really nice white papers I'm going to call out. I'm certainly not going to read them to you, but this one that I'm highlighting is a white paper on what Microsoft has done internally to set up a bunch of governance rules to keep the Power Platform both a productivity tool for all of the Microsoft employees, but also a safe place to build things where they're keeping a handle on it and making sure that we aren't getting data sources exposed that are secret and all those kind of fun things. And then down here, there was another white paper that has been launched that is on how to use Power Platform for app modernization projects. And a lot of people are trying to modernize a lot of legacy apps and trying to decide whether it's pro code or low code that you ought to use when modernizing those apps is always part of the decision. If you're going to use low code, there's a lot of really great tips and tricks on how Power Platform can speed that and ease the transition so that the project can take a little less time. This one I'm about to click into, I had not heard of until very recently. Our PowerCat team has been busy at work building an enhancement for the approvals connector that is part of Power Automate. And approvals connector is fantastic for a whole bunch of relatively simple approvals. It can do some interesting things, and you can put branching logic together and make some complex requirements come to life, especially if you're willing to kind of put an app back in behind some things. And that's essentially what the PowerCat team did, is they're still using the Power Automate approvals connector to do what they do in here from the automation standpoint in making those approvals surfaced to whoever needs to do the approving, but put a whole bunch of back-end Power Automate flows that control a lot of business logic and some apps that are saving some data and giving some users the ability to configure these complex, long-running approvals that are in many different business processes. So it's a great tool set to be able to use to kind of make the standard capabilities much richer and more complex to be able to support those complex scenarios, I should say. It's simpler to support a complex scenario. So anyway, I put the link to just downloading it right off of GitHub on here as well. I'm pretty sure that was in the docs, but I tried to make it easy for folks. Last thing is Clay Wiesner every month puts a nice feature update reminder post together about all the things that have come out in the Power Apps space in the past month. So a couple of things that I wasn't quite aware of. Cards not only got that Power Automate connector added, but they got added right into the application lifecycle management capabilities. There's completely solution aware now. DLP rules also now apply to cards, just like any other Power Platform asset. So nice to know that cards are kind of becoming a very first party citizen in the Power Platform with some of these new enhancements going generally available. Also, the new and improved PowerFX formula bar that was something you had to go choose if you wanted it, kind of in the settings area of the Power Apps Maker portal, is now on by default. But for a brand new app, it doesn't switch on for your legacy apps unless you've got them completely updated, but you can certainly use it, and it is a nicer experience. I tend to use this one all the time. Link to Fabric, we talked about. It is a great addition for all the data that's in Dataverse and getting that into Fabric, so you can do all kinds of other things with it, and you can even bring it back into Dataverse, so a lot of nice things going there. Named formulas in Power Apps, generally available. They perform even better now, and they are supported, so use them. And then I already talked about the Flow Connector. Copilot extension, we've talked about quite a little bit in the last show, so the unique thing here that he's just kind of honing in on, I guess, is that the plugin capability with Power Platforms and with OpenAI plugins is right there in Copilot Studio. So use that as desired to kind of manipulate your Copilots wherever you are using them, whether they're Power Platform based or else. They could be in Dynamics, they could be in modern workplace areas, they could be in custom apps, wherever you're putting Copilots together. If you use Copilot Studio, these plugins are right there at your disposal to be able to plug in and have access to all of the goodness that all the applications you have data in that we already have a connector for can leverage. So good stuff. whole bunch of other good stuff in the documentation updates. So take a look at all these things, and if they're useful for you, pay attention. I've only got one other thing, and that's that in our customer insights product, on the data side of it, especially in the kind of a customer data platform side, we've had quite a few updates for where Copilot can make a difference in bringing all the data together and understanding how to make the segments. That's kind of been around for a while, but we've now put a bunch of other stuff in to improve data quality and make it easier to configure and just let Copilot do more and more of the work. It's also going to be reviewing kind of what's there and giving you insights and advice and all kinds of other things along the way. So pay attention if you are thinking about or already a user of our Customer Insights data product, the CDP, and check out this blog post to see a bunch of the new capabilities that it just lit up. So with that, I've kind of run through all of the CE and Power Platform things. Going to hand it over to you, Chen.
All right, sounds good, Bart. Let me find my screen to share. Bear with me, since this is the first time.
No worries. Our audience knows we often go a couple of minutes long.
All right, sounds good. So, can you see my screen?
We have you.
All right, sounds good. So, typically, Dan covers anything between F&O, HR, project operations, and commerce. My background is heavily in the finance and project operations space, and therefore, that would be my focus today. I love to talk about some of these new features that I actually didn't know was planned. So I'm glad for this opportunity to actually talk about this. The first item here are some of the cross-app updates that are available. And I'm going to bring this over here. And I guess I have to share that screen too, right?
Yeah, or just drag it on top of this one for the moment. Oh. Either one works.
I think I have to share the entire screen. Bear with me. Desktop, there we go. All right.
There you are.
Yeah, so these are some of the enhancements that are made just for the application in general. So first of all, the easy access to Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. You know, I'll leave these links to, available to you, but this just makes it easier for a bunch of different users when setting up the environments and making use of the virtual entities when you're working with Dynamics 365. So what that means is, if you're trying to build an app, you're trying to build an automation, or you're trying to build some sort of Power BI reports, potentially this is going to save you time by leveraging some of those virtual entities to be able to pull data directly from D365 and work with those data. There's also this new feature, which I'm not too familiar with, but I'll just kind of introduce to you on a high level so you can read more into it. This is the export to data lake. Transitions to Synapse Link for Dataverse. There's some of the business values there. Again, I'll leave the link to the article for you to review. There's the offline support for Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations virtual table. And then lastly, the support for asynchronous operations in Duo, right? So as you can see, we've made some enhancements to make working with Dynamics 365 from the Power Platform side a lot easier, right? Well, these enhancements relate to just making data more easily accessible and available if you're in the Power Platform side of things, okay? So that is the first item. The second item is this one. Now, this really gets into the finance area of the application. And what I gather was there were quite a few notable enhancements, especially around cash and bank. So you'll see a couple of these features are actually in that area. And then there are some features in specifically AP, as well as some foreign currency areas. So this one here, use foreign currency or use bank foreign currency revaluation enhancements. There are really two enhancements that were made here. So this feature was already available, but the enhancement does two things. The first thing is it will allow the user to decide whether they want to keep all dimensions or no dimensions at all when they create those foreign currency revaluation entries for banks. Okay, and that's important because before this enhancement, the only option there was to keep all financial dimensions. And some customers may not want to keep dimensions on those revaluation transactions because it creates additional transactions they may not need. Therefore, this option allows them to turn that off, so they get a very clean and simple one-line entry per bank account. That's the first part of this enhancement. The second is the calculation of the unrealized gains and losses slightly changed, as it implies here. And I'm going to let you read into this a little more, but what this really translates to in a simple term is it's going to make the calculation of the gains and losses more consistent with how AP and AR currency revaluations work. Okay, so it's going to become more consistent with the AP and AR side of things. So that's great. That is that feature. The next one is import bank statements automatically. This is really important because for a while we've supported the import of BAI2 files during the bank reconciliation process. The gap that we've had was not being able to consume those BAI2 files automatically. What that meant was someone had to open up the bank reconciliation form, click the import button, pick the file, and then continue the process. And essentially what this feature does is it eliminates that process I just described. It allows for the system to pick up that BAI2 file or the other two bank statement files that we support directly from the SharePoint site. And once it picks that file up, it will create that bank statement record in the system so that your user can continue to take the reconciliation process forward. Now, when I first read this, I thought about, well, how that's great, but how do I actually get the file into the SharePoint site, right? So what does that look like? Well, because we have the Power Automates and we have native connectors with SharePoint, that means that you can potentially connect with a bank service or whatever bank or wherever the file is coming from. You can connect that and then bring it into the SharePoint site using the Power Automates flow. So this is something really small, but it's fairly important to save the user's time and really automates the entire bank rec process. Okay, so that's a notable one that is coming. The next one is support more complex bank reconciliation matching rules. Now this is still in preview. Or excuse me, it's not generally available yet. It was slated for October 2023, so it's coming soon. What this does is it adds a couple of more complex matching rules. Typically, we're all familiar with the one-to-one, which means if you have a bank statement line, it will match to one bank transaction in Dynamics 365. Currently, the system supports rules that goes one-to-one. Well, in some cases, you may have one-to-many, many-to-one, or many-to-many. And this is what the feature allows, right? It adds it adds the capability to define rules to support 3 of those scenarios. Now, I got to be honest, I thought about this, and the only thing I can think of right now as far as use cases and example would be for when you have potentially multiple or excuse me, one deposit, one customer deposit that shows up on a bank account, but you want that line to settle against multiple customer payments, therefore bank transactions and dynamics. So that would qualify under the one-to-many, and this is what this rule would allow you to do. Right now, I haven't come up with what an actual use case would be for the many-to-one as well as many-to-many, but I'm sure there are. And as we roll this out, we're going to hear more customers be able to take advantage of this. So this is really interesting and important. The next topic is generates payment journal, settle open invoice directly from bank reconciliation. Another really important feature that I personally have, basically encountered on every implementation that I've been on. And what this really does is when you have a customer deposits, or maybe a customer payments that don't go through, that don't originate from Dynamics, what you're going to get are these transactions that show up on your bank statements. Now, when it comes to time to reconcile that bank account with that bank statement, what you typically run into is that you'll have to first create those customer payments in a customer payment journal, and at the same time, settle those payments against customers' payment invoices. And then once you've done that, you can then continue with the reconciliation process by reconciling what you've just created with what shows up on the bank. That's really time consuming, right? Wouldn't it be nicer if you were to be able to create those customer payments journals and be able to settle open invoices at the same time you're doing the reconciliation all in one place? And that's essentially what this feature allows you to do, is that we've brought the two processes together so that you can do the creation of the customer payment journal, you can do the settlement of the customer invoices directly in the bank reconciliation tool itself. Okay, really important, and it's going to provide lots of value for customers. The next one is around net customer and vendor balances. So again, what I'm seeing is that we've recently made, many enhancements around the cash and bank and around the payment process, and this is one of them. So netting customer and vendor balances, let me back up a little bit and explain what a situation might be. So imagine you have a customer, imagine you have a customer who is also your vendor, right? So you're buying stuff from them, you're also selling stuff to them. And what happens is, in the system, they're set up as customer and vendors, but in the back end, they're essentially one entity. And what happens is they might tell you, hey, Bart, we don't want you to cut us checks. We don't want you to pay us, and I don't want us to pay you for every single transaction that take place during the month. Why don't we agree on who owes who what that net amount is at the end of the month, and either you pay me once or I pay you once for that net amount. Wouldn't that be nicer? So this is essentially what it accomplishes. It allows you to figure out if you owe the vendor or if they owe you, right? So who has to make the payments, essentially, is what this allows you to do. So in essence, it will give you a couple of things. It will have an overview screen that allows you to pick the customer invoice and the vendor's invoice, allow you to net them, and then figure out, okay, do I have a net position, or do they have a net position, right? And this is all done in a single entity. It also comes with other features like history, having a detail, as well as reports to show you the results of the netting process. There's also the automatic netting, and this can be set up to make the netting happen on a more regular basis, say monthly basis. The other thing the other use case this is really important is internally within your organization. This may not be external parties that you're dealing with. It could actually be your intercompany transaction. So you might be buying and selling inventory between your internal legal entities, and maybe you have an agreement between those two entities where at the end of the month you just want to make one transaction that represents the net, right? Versus having 100 checks going that way and another 100 going this way. You just want to figure out the net, and this is particularly useful in that case. 5 years ago, when I was on implementation, I've had to do an exact system design or modification to achieve this. I'm really thrilled that this is now part of the solution. Okay, so really important enhancements that we made here. All right, so the next topic is handle periodic invoices, or sorry, excuse me, recurring invoices. Okay, this is specifically in the area of accounts payable. And traditionally, we have the ability to set up recurring invoice templates. Templates might be a recurring rent charge, a recurring cell phone, electricity, or rents, or something like that, where every month you're expecting to pay that same invoice. We have the ability to create templates. However, what was lacking was the ability to automate the creation of the invoices based on those templates. What that meant was the user had to go into the system every month. They still had to run the process to create those invoices. Essentially, what this feature does is automates that process. So it truly can be a background process that you set up that will create and post the invoices so that they're ready for payments. Okay, that is what that feature is. The next one is calculate foreign currency during ledger settlements. I love this one. Okay, we've had a customer ask about this 2 years ago, and we have been working really hard on getting this feature released for general public. So where this is useful is, we all know about AP and AR subledger revaluation, right? If you're dealing with a vendor or a customer that exists that maybe cross the border and they use a different currency, system allows you to track their open items in those different currencies, and at the end of the month you can calculate the unrealized gains and losses, as well as having the ability to calculate realized gains and losses. So a lot of accounting technical terms I'm throwing you there, but the point I'm trying to make is that we've had this capability for AP and AR for a while. Now, for things like loans payable, right? We want the system to treat loans payable the same way. However, loans payable aren't typically tracked in a vendor or a customer subledger. They're typically just a GL account. So what this feature essentially does is that it allows you to treat those payables or those receivables that you track in the GL account. It allows you to do the gains and losses, both unrealized and realized, the same way that you could in AP and AR. So it's just really important that you see the value of this, and that calculation of the realized gains and losses happen when you ledger settle the transactions in the system. Okay, so very important. I'm glad this is being released, so it'll be available in February 2024. Okay. All right. Now there's just a couple of things, a couple of other enhancements I'll just touch on. Let's go ahead and take a look at this one. This is, let me scroll down here and just talk about this. This is basically allowing users to use generative AI. What that means is just natural language to create reports. Okay, the screenshot that you're seeing here is basically it within the business performance analytics. And for those of you who are not familiar with business performance analytics, it's a it's a tool that we've recently released to allow users to access data and be able to build Power BI reports and Excel-based reports much easier. And it also comes with enhanced data model that is optimized for every single work stream that you can think of, right? So this Copilot feature is actually within the BPA tool itself. And as you can see on the right-hand side, it gives you a way to ask what you want to see. And for example, you can ask the Copilot to give me a comparison of my revenues to the budgets for every quarter this year. And the Copilot is going to take your question and it will turn into visualizations as you see on the right-hand side. And you can decide if you want to keep that visualization as a permanent visualization for you to continue to use. So it makes creating new reports, visualizations much easier. I myself am familiar with Power BI, but I can't say that I'm always, I'm familiar with every single visualization that Power BI provides. So having something like this is going to make it even simpler to create Power BI based reports. And this is going to be available within the BPA tool itself. The next item is the transforming supply chain. Now, this is an article, and it's just some of the enhancements that we're making around supply chain, specifically how we've infused AI into demand forecasting and demand planning. I'm going to have this as a leave behind. My background is actually not too much in supply chain, but just look at all of these benefits that this that this investment provides, right? Resource allocation, cost reduction, long-term planning, and the article actually goes into a little bit more detail about the types of AI-powered forecasting that this whole feature set provides. So I'm going to have that as a leave behind for you to read up on. And then same thing here, we've also made some enhancements around demand planning app. Again, just a leave behind, and maybe we'll have Dan go into a little bit more detail next time to describe what those features are. And this is the Microsoft Ignite 2023 Insights and Opportunities for ERP Applications. Hopefully all of you had a chance to attend the Ignite live events. I surely did. But this summarizes anything relevant when it comes to ERP that we have, right? So top insights and opportunities for ERP and applications. Again, really nice read for you to understand sort of our perspective on where ERP is going and what Microsoft is doing around ERP and bring more AI and Copilot features into the ERP landscape. Okay. So I believe that's all, Bart. Am I missing anything?
I don't think so. You had a lot of content there today, Chin.
Yeah, yeah. I could talk finance all day, Bart.
I gathered that. You wanted to go into the finance details, which was fun.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us for another show, and we will have this blog posted sometime later today so that people can consume the show notes in the typical blog format. And we will catch you all in 2 weeks on the 15th. And I don't know whether it'll be Dan or Max at that time. I think we're going to try to start rotating a lot quicker. So however that works is fine, but probably be Dan and be my guest. And Chin, you might be behind the scenes producing at that point. Anyway, looking forward to it. We'll see everybody in 2 weeks. Thanks all.
Take care. Bye.